that you want to create and whatever is realistic within the system. I think
I have a question. So the first one is that now if you have many attributes and also many levels, how do you determine the most significant ones you can use in your study? Now another one, I'm seeing that DCE is addressing the problem with the hypothetical preferences, but when it comes to the actual, it does not deal with that. So that means you cannot do a comparison. There is a gap in between what is happening versus what is not happening. So what is this specific assumption that DCE is taking so that it does not consider the actual preferences? And lastly, is about the hypothetical bias, which you mentioned. Now that this is qualitative data, then does, like now terrorism, which has been mentioned, could you say now that that is the bias?
Okay, thanks for the questions. So the number of attributes and levels you have in your DCE matter, okay? The number of levels and the number of attributes and levels you have in a DCE matter because they introduce something we normally call a cognitive burden. So assuming you have a discrete choice experiment and the choice task has 10 attributes. And then, has 10 attributes. And then you also have, let's say, 5 options to choose from. For you to consider to process that information as an individual, it's so burdening. Because by the time you are getting to the 10th attribute, you have forgotten what has been said at the first or second or whatever attribute, okay? So we normally say that, and there's a systematic review that has looked at, this. We normally say that, it's advisable for your DCE to not go beyond 6 attributes, okay? It's advisable for your DCE to not go beyond 6 attributes. Now, there is a process, whole process of coming up with these, attributes and levels. There's this person who has described this process, and you two people should know them. They should know him. Yeah, the selection process of attributes. You and Sophie, these two people are becoming DCE gurus. That process of wording, rewarding, who is that person? I've also forgotten the name. Sophie should know this. Okay, but essentially there's a process of, I'll share the name, it skipped my mind too. There's a process of selecting attributes and levels where, so for example, you might have done your qualitative interviews and you have several attributes, but there are some attributes that might be correlated, okay? So for example, Fatma's DCE, she's getting some attributes related to, so she's wanted to look at the use of knowledge translation. So once you have, how do the policymakers involve use of evidence in the policymaking process? And she's having things like, availability of the evidence versus timeliness. Okay, so these are 2 important attributes, but they are correlated in the sense that if it's available, the availability and timeliness. So even if it's not timely, then it's not there, or there's some level of, if one is available, the other is either there or not there. So there's some correlation. So the point I'm trying to drive at here is that there's general guidelines to how many attributes and levels you should include. Please do not go beyond 6. There's a process for generating attributes and levels. There's so much we can cover in one day, so we do not want to get into that. Is it Headland Boiler? Yes, the name, we got it together. So it's Headland Boilers process. So there's a very good process. I think it's a 2016 paper that explains that whole process of developing attributes and levels. Then I think I'll combine your two questions, and this is the last thing I'll say for now in the interest of time. So hypothetical bias. So I said hypothetical bias comes when there's a difference between what people say they will do versus what they actually do. Okay? So hypothetical bias is that difference. Now, because of the hypothetical nature, because in DCEs, we are asking people, what will you do given this scenario? Okay? Given this scenario,